Hi guys, welcome back to my read long channel. This is James and the Giant Peach by Roald Dahl. We're on chapter 29, page 117. This is all Roald Dahl's own work. I'm just reading it for entertainment and pleasure reasons. Let's get going, guys. 29, chapter 29. It seems like a long time before the seagulls were able to put the peach away from that horrible rainbow cloud, but they managed it at last, and then everybody gathered around the wretched centipede and began arguing about the best way to get the paint off his body. He really did look a sight. He was all purple all over, and now that the paint was beginning to dry and harden, he was forced to sit very stiff. Sorry, I tried that again. He was purple all over, and now that the paint was beginning to dry and harden, he was forced to sit very stiff and upright, as though he were encased in cement, and all 42 of his legs were sticking out straight in front of him, like rods. He tried to say something, but his lips wouldn't move. All he could do now was to make gurgling noises in his throat. The old green grasshopper reached out and touched him carefully on the stomach. But how could it possibly have dried so quickly? He asked. It's rainbow paint, James answered. Rainbow paint dries very quick and very hard. I detest paint, Miss Spider announced. It frightens me. It reminds me of Aunt Spiker, the late Aunt Spiker, because the last time she painted her kitchen ceiling, my poor darling grandmother stepped into it by mistake when it was still wet, and there she stuck. And all through the night we could hear her calling to us, saying, Help, help, help! And it was heartbreaking to listen to her. But what could we do? Not a thing until the next day when the paint had dried. And then, of course, we all rushed over to her and calmed her down and gave her some food. Believe it or not, she lived for 6 months like that, upside down on the ceiling with her legs stuck permanently in the paint. She really did. We fed her every day. We brought her fresh fries straight from the web. But then, on the 26th of April last, Aunt Sponge, the late Aunt Sponge, happened to glance up at the ceiling, and she spotted her. A spider, she cried, a disgusting spider. Quick, fetch me the mop with the long handle. And then, oh, it was so awful. I can't bear to think of it. Miss Spider wiped away a tear and looked sadly at the centipede. You poor thing, she murmured. I do feel sorry for you. It'll never come off, the earthworm said brightly. Our centipede will never move again. He will turn into a statue, and we shall be able to put him in the middle of the lawn with a bird bath on top of his head. We could try peeling him like a banana, the old green grasshopper suggested, or rubbing him with sandpaper, the ladybird said. Now, if he stuck out his tongue, the earthworm said, smiling a little for perhaps the first time in his life, if he stuck it out really far, then we could all catch hold of it and start pulling. And if we pulled hard enough, we could turn him inside out, and we could have his new skin. There was a pause while the others considered his interesting proposal. I think, James said slowly, I think that's the best thing to do. Then he stopped. What was that? He asked quickly. I heard a voice. I heard someone shouting. Chapter 30. They all raised their heads, listening. Shh, there it is again. Shh, but the voice was too far away for them to hear what it was saying. It's a cloud man, Miss Spider cried. I just know it's a cloud man. They're after us again. It came from above, the earthworm said, and automatically everybody looked upward. Everybody except the centipede, who couldn't move. Ouch, they said. Help! Mercy! We're going to catch it this time. For what they now saw, swirling and twisting directly over their heads, was an immense black cloud, a terrible, dangerous, thundery-looking thing that began to rumble and roar, even as they were staring at it. And then from high up on top of the cloud, the faraway voice came down to them once again, this time very loud and clear. On with the faucets, it shouted. On with the faucets, on with the faucets. 3 seconds later, the hole underneath of the cloud seemed to split and burst open like a paper bag, and then out came the water. They saw it coming. It was quite easy to see because it wasn't just raindrops. It wasn't raindrops at all. It was a great solid mass of water that might have been a lake or a whole ocean dropping out of the sky on top of them. And down it came, down and down and down, crashing first onto the seagulls and then onto the peach itself, while the poor travellers shrieked with fear and groped around frantically for something to catch hold of. The peach stem, the silk strings, anything they could find. and all the time the water came pouring and roaring down upon them, bouncing and smashing and sloshing and slashing and swashing and swirling and surging and whirling and gurgling and gushing and rushing, and it was like being pinned down underneath the biggest waterfall in the world and not being able to get out. They couldn't speak, they couldn't see, they couldn't breathe, and James Henry Trotter, holding on madly to one of the silk strings above the peach stem, told himself that this must surely be the end of everything at last. But then, just as suddenly as it had started, the deluge stopped. They were out of it, and it was right all over. The wonderful seagulls had flown right through it and had come out safely on the other side. Once again, the giant peach was sailing peacefully through the mysterious moonlit sky. I am drowned, gasped the old green grasshopper, spitting out water by the pint. It's gone right around my skin, the earthworm groaned. I always thought that my skin was waterproof, but it isn't, and now I'm full of rain. Look at me, shouted the centipede excitedly. It's washed me clean. The paint's all gone. I can move again. That's the worst news I've had in a long time, the earthworm said. The centipede was dancing around the deck and turning somersaults in the air and singing at the top of his voice. And I'm not going to sing this one. Oh, hooray for the storm and the rain. I can move, I don't feel any pain. And now I'm a pest, I'm the biggest and the best, and most marvellous pest once again. Oh, do shut up, the old green grasshopper said. Look at me, cried the centipede. Look at me, I am freed, not a scratch, nor a bruise, nor a bleed. To his grey fine gent they all thought they had sent, and I very near went, I very near went, but they sent quite the wrong centipede. Chapter 31. How fast we are all going all of a sudden, the ladybird said. I wonder why. I don't think the seagulls like this place any better than we do, James answered. I imagine they want to get out as soon as they can. They got a bad fright in that storm we've just been through. Faster and faster flew the seagulls, skimming across the sky at tremendous pace, with the peach trailing out behind them. Cloud after cloud went on by either side of all of them, ghostly white in the moonlight, and several more times during the night the travellers caught a glimpse of the cloud-men moving around on the tops of these clouds, working their sinister magic upon the world below. Once they passed a snow machine in operation with the cloud-men, turning the handle and a great blizzard of snowflakes blowing out the great funnel above. They saw huge drums that were used for making thunder, and the cloud-men beating them furiously with long hammers. They saw the frost factories and the wind producers and the places where cyclones and tornadoes were manufactured and sent spinning down towards the earth. And once deep in the hollow of the large billowy clouds, they spotted something that could only have been the Cloudman city. There were caves everywhere running into the clouds, and at the entrances to cave the Cloudmen's wives were crouching over little stoves with frying pans in their hands, frying for their husbands' suppers, and hundreds of Cloudmen's children were frisking about all over the place and shrieking with laughter and sliding down the billows of the cloud on the toboggans. An hour later, just before dawn, the travellers heard a soft whooshing noise above their heads, and they glanced up and saw an immense grey bat-like creature swooping down towards them out of the dark. It circled round and round the peach, flapping its great wings slowly in the moonlight and staring at the travellers. Then it uttered a series of long, deep, melancholy cries and flew off again into the night. Oh, I do wish morning would come, Miss Spider said, shivering all over. It won't be long now, James answered. Look, it's getting lighter over here there already. They all sat in silence, watching the sun as it came up slowly over the rim of the horizon for the new day. Chapter 32. And then, when full daylight came at last, they all got into their feet and stretched their poor cramped bodies, and then the centipede, who always seemed to see things first, shouted, Look, there's land below! He is right, they cried, running to the edge of the peach and peering over. Hooray, hooray! It looks like streets and houses, but how enormous it all is! A vast city, glistening in the early morning sunshine, lay spread out 3,000 feet below them. At that height, the cars were like the little beetles crawling along the streets, and people walking on the pavements looked no larger than tiny grains of soot. But what tremendous tall buildings! Exclaimed the ladybird. I've never seen anything like them before in England. Which town do you think it is? "This couldn't possibly be England," said the old green grasshopper. "Then where is it?" asked Miss Spider. "You know what those buildings are," shouted James, jumping up and down with excitement. "Those are skyscrapers. So this must be America, and that, my friends, means we have crossed the Atlantic Ocean overnight." "You don't mean it," they cried. "It's not possible. It's incredible. It's unbelievable. I've always dreamt of going to America," cried the centipede. "I had a friend who—" "Be quiet," said the earthworm. "Who cares about your friend? The thing we've got to know about now is how on earth are we going to get down to earth?" asked James. "Ask James," said the ladybird. "I don't think that should be very difficult," James told them. "All we have to do is cut loose a few seagulls. Not too many, mind you, but just enough that the others can't quite keep us in the air. Then down we shall go, slowly and gently, until we reach the ground. Centipede will bite through the strings for us one at a time." Chapter 33. Far below them in the city of New York, something like pandemonium was breaking out. A great round ball as big as the house had been sighted hovering high up in the sky over the very centre of Manhattan, and the cry had gone up that it was an enormous bomb sent over by another country to blow the whole city to smithereens. Air raid sirens began wailing in every section. All radio and television programs were interrupted with announcements that the population must get down to their cellars immediately. 1 million people walking in the streets on their way to work looked up the sky and saw the monster hovering above them, and started running for the nearest subway entrance to take cover. Generals grabbed hold of the telephones and shouted orders to everyone they could think of. The mayor of New York called up the president of the United States down in Washington, D.C., to ask him for help, and the president, who at the moment was having breakfast in his pajamas, quickly pushed away his half-finished plate of sugar crisps and started pressing buttons right and left to summon his admirals and the generals. And all the way across the far stretch of America, in all the 50 states from Alaska to Florida, from Pennsylvania to Hawaii, the alarm was sounded, and the word went out that the biggest bomb in New York, in the city of the world, was hovering over New York City, and that at any moment it might go off. Chapter 34. "Come on, Centipede, bite through the first string," James ordered. The centipede took one of the silk strings between his teeth and bit through it, and one again, but not with angry cloudmen dangling from the end of the string this time. A single seagull came away from the rest of the flock and went flying off on its own. "Bite another," James ordered. The centipede bit through another string. "Why aren't we sinking?" "We are sinking." "No, we're not." "Don't forget the peach is a lot lighter now than when we started. It's awful lot of juice when all those hailstones hit in the night. Cut away 2 more seagulls, Centipede. Ah, that's better. Here we go. Now we really are sinking." "Yes, this is perfect. Don't bite any more, Centipede, or we'll sink too fast. Gently does it." Slowly the great peach began losing height, and the buildings and streets down below began coming closer and closer. "Do you think we'll all get pictures in the papers when we get down?" the ladybird asked. "My goodness, I'd forgotten to polish my boots," the centipede said. "Everyone must help me polish my boots before we arrive." "Oh, for heaven's sake," the earthworm said. "Can't you ever stop thinking about—" But he never finished the sentence, for suddenly, whoosh! And they looked up and saw a huge 4-engine plane come shooting out of a nearby cloud and go whizzing past them with not more than 20 feet over their heads. This was actually the regular early morning passenger plane coming into New York from Chicago, and as it went by, it sliced right through every single one of the silken strings, and immediately the seagulls broke away, and the enormous peach, having nothing to hold up in the air any longer, went tumbling towards the earth like a lump of lead. "Help!" cried the centipede. "Save us!" cried the spider. "We are lost!" cried the ladybird. "This is the end!" cried the old green grasshopper. "James!" cried the earthworm. "Do something, James! Quickly do something!" "I can't," cried James. "I'm sorry. Goodbye. Shut your eyes, everybody. It won't be long now." Chapter 35. Round and upside down went the peach as it plummeted towards the earth, and they were all clinging desperately to the stem to save themselves from being flung into space. Faster and faster it fell, down and down and down, racing closer and closer to the houses and streets below, where it would surely smash into a million pieces when it hit. And all the way along Fifth Avenue and Madison Avenue and all along the other streets in the city, people who had not yet reached the underground shelters looked up and saw it coming, and they stopped running and stood there staring in a sort of stupor at what they thought was the biggest bomb in all of the world falling out of the sky on to their heads. A few women screamed, others knelt down on the sidewalks and began praying aloud. Strong men turned to one another and said things like, I guess this is it, Joe, and goodbye, everybody, goodbye. And for the next 30 seconds, the whole city held its breath, waiting for the end to come. Chapter 36. Goodbye, Ladybird, gasped James, clinging to the stem of the falling peach. Goodbye, Centipede. Goodbye, everybody. There were only a few seconds to go now, and it looked as though they were going to fall right among the tallest buildings. James could see the skyscrapers rushing up to meet them at the most awful speed, and most of them had square flat tops, but the very tallest of them had a top that tapered off into a long sharp point, like an enormous silver needle sticking up into the sky, and it was precisely onto the top of this needle that the giant peach fell. There was a squelch, the needle went in deep, and suddenly there was a giant peach caught and spiked upon the very pinnacle of the Empire State Building. And that, guys, is where I am going to stop it. So the next chapter will be 37. We are on page 132 if you're reading my copy. Thank you so much again for listening. Until the next read along, guys. Goodbye.